happens when your job is caregiving and your career is content? That's the question sitting underneath every frame of Million Dollar Nannies, and it's not one the show ever quite asks out loud. So, real quick, if you're not familiar, Million Dollar Nannies follows 8 young elite nannies who head to Ibiza for a summer to launch their own agency, built by nannies, for nannies, connecting themselves with the world's wealthiest families. At the center of it is Leah Bars, a former nanny for Kourtney Kardashian who spent close to a decade working for celebrity and ultra-high net worth families, and who built a TikTok following posting lifestyle and behind-the-scenes nanny content before the show existed. One thing you'll notice quickly about the cast is that it's by no means random. It's specifically a cast of caregivers who already had an online audience or were actively building one. The agency premise is real, but so is the fact that every nanny on this show walked in with a platform or the ambition to get one. And that's the tell. This show comes from the same production team behind The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, the show that turned mom talk into a reality TV genre. Million Dollar Nannies is doing the exact same move for nanny talk. Take an online community that already monetizes a very specific kind of intimate access, in this case, access to the literal daily lives of the ultra wealthy, and give it a season order. Which brings us to the actual question worth sitting with. When caregiving becomes content, who's the show actually about? The families paying the bills, the kids being cared for, or the nannies who are, let's be clear, the real stars here? Adults who signed up to be filmed, competing for gigs, managing workplace politics, and building personal brands in real time. So if the thesis of the show is caregiving repackaged as content, the first thing to look at is how the show actually sells itself, because it's right there in the marketing. Rather than pitch it as a documentary about domestic labor, the official synopsis pitches the show as a dream with stakes. These nannies are promised VIP families, life-changing money, and a shot at something bigger than any of them could build alone, until fierce competition, personal drama, and a scandal from the past threaten to derail the dream before the summer sets. And anyone who's worked in childcare, myself included, would tell you that that's not childcare industry language. That is startup reality show language. The same pitch structure you'd get from a show about founders launching an app, just with a nanny agency instead. And the show delivers on scandal almost immediately. Leah Bars, the nanny fronting the whole agency, the one with the built-in platform and the Kardashian pedigree, reveals early on that she'd previously slept with a father who'd hired her to watch his child. It rips through the group instantly because in the nanny world, as the show frames it, that's close to a cardinal sin. Whatever you think of the specifics, notice the function of the scandal. Within the first stretch of episodes, the show has already handed you a moral flashpoint with a named adult cast member at the center of it. Here, we have professional judgment, workplace trust, personal history, the exact kind of hook a scripted show would build a whole arc around, except this one's framed as a scandal that actually happened. So, you've got two things stacking on top of each other from minute one. A premise sold with the language of ambition and opportunity, and a scandal sold with the language of betrayal and trust. That's the show's real product, not childcare. Stakes. And the kids in these families are structurally the backdrop those stakes play out in front of, not the subject of them. So the show has its stakes established early. From there, it runs the same way most of these do. A rotating cast of workplace relationships, each one illustrating a different flavor of the laborious content tension. For instance, we have Taylor Hayward. She is placed with Nicola Wills, a single mother, entrepreneur, and podcast host who refers to Taylor and nannies like her as her nanny daughter, with the relationship framed on both sides in explicitly familial, almost mother-daughter terms. That framing is worth noting because it's doing real work for the show. It raises the emotional stakes of every workplace dispute to family conflict levels. So when Taylor steps away from her shift to be a helicopter to her boyfriend Mitchell, leaving the kids with another trusted nanny in the house, and Nicola finds out, it doesn't play as an HR issue. It plays as straight-up betrayal. Nicola fires her on the spot. They later reconcile, bonding over unrelated personal history, and Nicola rehires her. That's a complete arc, complete with trust, rupture, accountability, and repair, all in one neat cycle. But notice what the actual kids are doing this entire time. They're the reason for the conflict, and they're otherwise completely absent from it. The scene isn't about their care being disrupted. It's about Taylor and Nicola's relationship. The kids, in other words, are the pretext, but not the subject. project. Then there's Hannah Joy Davis, a professional dancer, one of the less experienced nannies in the luxury world, who got her spot in Ibiza because her friend Jack McCann, an established Manny with his own following, wouldn't join unless she could come too. Hannah's storyline is less about scandal and more about access. She's there less because of a client relationship and more because of a social one, which the show treats as its own kind of subplot. Can she prove she belongs in a competitive field she's arguably networked her way into rather than credentialed her way into? Again, the actual families she'd be caring for barely factor into the storyline at all. It's a story about her career playing out in a job that, in case we all forgot, is about someone else's kids. And then there's the through line that, in my opinion, the show leans on hardest for novelty. The three dads, Mark Ebinger, Tom Freeman, and Moke Coffey, are a three-father household, and the show treats their family structure itself as a selling point. You don't normally see this on TV hook. Not unlike the role reversal pitch used in House of Stassi, which I'll be releasing a video on this Friday. Their storyline gives the season a family dynamic to point to that isn't wrapped in scandal, which does useful narrative work. It lets the show claim range, alternating between workplace drama with stakes with Taylor and Nicola, and wholesome representation with the three dads. So no single tone dominates the season. But even here, the representation being sold is about the dads. Their kids exist as the occasion for the milestone, not as characters in it. Put those threads together, and I think you can see the pattern from earlier just running at the character level. Every relationship on this show gets narrated through an emotional register several sizes bigger than Nanny has a job. Firings become betrayals. Networking becomes destiny. Family structure becomes a talking point. And running underneath every single one of those plays is the same kind of absence. The kids these storylines are technically about never actually become the story. That's not incidental. That's the same commodification I opened this video talking about, except now you're saying exactly where it leaves the people it's supposedly centered on. And I'm not the first person to clock what's happening here. Critics landed on this almost immediately. For instance, Slate's review put it about as bluntly as it gets, saying the show treats the children in these families as baggage and non-entities, background elements the show has to work around, not people it's actually interested in. And that tracks with what I've been laying out. When every adult relationship on this show gets inflated into betrayal, destiny, or a talking point, the kids can't compete for narrative space. They're not the content. They're the reason the content exists, which turns out to be a very different thing. Even actual working nannies have pushed back publicly. Commentary circulating online from real nannies watching the show, essentially saying these aren't nannies, they're influencers and reality stars who happen to have a nannying credential, and the unprofessional behavior the show turns into drama is the kind of thing that gives their actual industry a bad look. And this isn't happening in a vacuum. It's the same move Below Deck has been running for over a decade. Below Deck takes service labor, deckhands, stews, chefs, and turns the workplace into the plot. Who's sleeping with who gets fired, who cracks under pressure, while the actual guests paying for the yacht become secondary characters. Million Dollar Nannies is just Below Deck with a nursery instead of a galley. Except this time, the cargo the crew is managing isn't inanimate. It's kids who can't consent to being background noise in someone else's reality show. So when I put those pieces together, critics calling out the exact dynamic I'm naming, actual nannies saying the show doesn't reflect their profession, and a genre template that's been running this exact formula for years on yachts, I don't think Million Dollar Nannies is an outlier. I think it's this template's most uncomfortable expression yet, precisely because the inventory this time is human and too young to have agreed to any of it. I think it's this template's most uncomfortable expression yet, precisely because the inventory this time is human and too young to have agreed to any of it. So, where does that leave Million Dollar Nannies? It's tempting to watch this and get mad at individual people. At Taylor for the beach, at Leah for the scandal, at any given nanny for chasing followers instead of just keeping their heads down and doing their jobs. But I think that's the wrong target, for the same reason it was the wrong target with House of Stassi. These are people responding rationally to an industry that's built an entire economy around exactly this behavior. Nanny talk already existed. The platform building already existed too. All this this show did was hand a camera crew to a system that was already selecting for the most online, most brand-aware caregivers, and then structure their actual jobs into a plot. The real question isn't, are these good nannies, though? It's what happens to an act of care once it has to also perform as content. Once every shift is a potential clip, every client relationship a potential storyline, every dispute a potential scandal, the job stops being just the job. It becomes raw material, and the people with the least ability to opt out of that arrangement, the actual children in these families, are the ones with no say in it at all. They didn't sign a release, they didn't build a platform. They're just the reason the platform has anything to film. That's the cost sitting underneath this entire genre, whether it's Ibiza nannies or super yacht stews or quote-unquote canceled reality stars rebuilding their brand. Somebody's actual life becomes somebody else's content pipeline, and the machine runs regardless of whether anyone involved consented to being fuel for it. Million Dollar Nannies just makes that a little harder to look away from because for once, some of the people caught up in it can't even agree to be there. That's Million Dollar Nannies and the commodification of care. If you've worked in this industry, nannying, childcare, any job where having a personality is now part of the resume, I'd genuinely like to hear if any of this tracked for you. Let me know down below. Goodbye.